So hello YouTube, it's been a while. So I just want to apologize to all my subscribers who may have seen that I haven't actually put out a video in a long time. The reason being, I've actually been making an animated show for streaming platforms for years now. It's called Destruna. Here's a teaser.
They call what you see in the glasses Reality Plus. It was created by someone very special, Gekka. We were told we'd never see her again. Impressive, right?
Yeah, you're real gorgeous.
Competitors will test their mental and physical strength as they battle brawlers, beasts, and perhaps their very own demons.
Hello, friends!
I know how much you've prepped for this. We're going to win.
Tie car winners will receive a single wish.
And when I do, I'm going to wish for Gekka to come back. She'll see that I never gave up on her.
So, you and me, best team, right? We can do this.
This, okay?
Because if I don't do it, it won't get done!
No, because you don't trust me! You have to control everything!
You're only competing as a cover. I brought you two in for another reason. Perhaps things here aren't what they seem.
With conviction, you can turn any dream into reality.
So, after my 2019 video about making a cartoon, I decided to invest every dollar I have and build a team to develop Destruna into an animated series. The plan was always to release this onto streaming platforms as opposed to YouTube, which isn't really the best platform for developing whole seasons of a cartoon. So this led to me pitching to Netflix, Crunchyroll, Cartoon Network, HBO, Paramount Plus, Nickelodeon, and Amazon. So in the pitch, I mentioned I've written and produced content on YouTube for millions of subscribers with over 2 billion lifetime views. I've headlined appearances at some of the biggest conventions across Australia, including VidCon, Supernova, and MadFest. So I'm ready to take my animated content to the next level. The question is, were we successful? Did we get the green light to make the whole show? So that's what this whole video is about. So Destruna is 6 years in the making, finding its origins in the launch of this channel, Super Planet Dolan. The last couple of years have been an absolute roller coaster, starting with nothing but a script. So I wrote the first pilot draft for this series in 2018. It was almost a compulsion. These ideas were just rattling around in my head every day. It was actually keeping me awake at night. So at the time, the characters were these Planet Dolan placeholders, because I knew I'd change them eventually, as I wanted this to be an original IP that's pretty separate from YouTube. So I worked with Honeybits, our storyboard artist, and at the same time Amphipop and I painstakingly created the looks of the characters, while I developed the characters' personalities and their backstories. I found a 3D character modeler from Sketchfab, commissioned him to create a loner model, a proof of concept of what the show's cel-shaded style would look like. It was actually really invaluable because I could show this model to people and they immediately got what we were going for. From there I set up an office. It was an exciting time, and it was a big relief to be around people again after making YouTube content by myself with everyone else located overseas. So on day one, it was me and 2 other staff. We were on laptops tethered to my mobile internet data, waiting for our 3D production team to arrive. Very humble beginnings. In fact, most of the time we were just setting up tables, taking out rubbish from all the boxes we unpacked, instead of doing really much else of anything. It was March 2020, so that was the perfect time for the biggest unexpected setback nobody could have foreseen. So, in a seething case of irony, after working from home on YouTube for 7 years straight, Melbourne, Australia suffered the worst, strictest and longest lockdown in the world. So by April 2020, our office was deserted, 1 month after we signed the lease and had begun work. For 2 years straight, we would work from home, then briefly be back in the office, then ping-pong back home. It crippled our productivity and it damaged morale, but we never gave up during this. In fact, the mid-creation of the pilot is a solid testament to the tenacity and the ingenuity of the team. It's still hard to believe it worked. So some of you might know, if you're a subscriber to this channel, we did an animation called Origin Agoobi. We actually did 2 of them. And so that was our first test. Origin Agoobi 2 was our first test about what it's like to create a show. It was only a 2-3 minute animation, and it turned out good. It was a 2D style, turned out good, but it wasn't streaming platform good. So I'd always wanted to go more towards 3D anyway, so I settled on a 3D limited animation style that emulated 2D, heavily driven by 2D storyboards from artists such as Honeybits. So as production continued, it afforded me the opportunity to write scripts for the rest of the season whenever I wasn't managing or producing. So the pilot was rewritten and reboarded in that time with new characters and a lot more detail, and it happened side by side as we were constructing scenes as the storyboards flew in. So the entire intro for the series was rebuilt because it was originally just a 1-minute joke scene about a grandma, but we turned it into a new 4.5-minute introduction to the main character Don, the disappearance of Gekka that triggers the main story. So every frame, every scene, every moment of the pilot has a story behind it. So much love and attention, but none more so than put into the characters. But the characters is where the trouble actually began during production. Because we planned to front load the pilot with most of the major characters of the series, we reached out to a lot of 3D character modelers to help us out. And the results we got were kind of varied. So they ranged from artists who were quick and dirty to downright unusable. So I wouldn't compromise on the look of the characters though, because as far as I am concerned, the centerpiece of Destruna, you can take shortcuts when it comes to scenes, or you can do matte paintings or assets. That's all fine, but when it comes to the characters, they have to look right, and you have to be believable, people have to be able to invest in them. So, if people are spending every moment of the show looking at them, it makes sense to put as much time into that as you can. So it's pretty crazy trying to build so many characters all at once. We needed like 9 of them, plus 2 more, kid variants for Don and Lona. So we'd prioritize animating the scenes with the finished characters as they came in, which made for a bit of a hectic schedule. But it was really the character rigs that gave us strife. So for those who aren't aware, when it comes to building 3D characters, they have to move, they have to animate correctly. If you've been into VTubing, you'd likely know about this. So the joints and the models of skeleton have to be rigged up in order for them to move properly. It's not enough to just have the model created. So the rigs are the tools that you need. And originally, our rigging team bit off a bit more than they could chew. So despite 3 or 4 months of work on Lona, she ended up looking like this, unfortunately. At this point, I can tell you it was a big morale sink after thinking, I saw this and I went home and was feeling kind of depressed, like, should we be investing in this show if this is how it's going to look? So I honestly contemplated pulling a plug and cutting my losses that day. Instead, I pulled myself up and started trawling through LinkedIn to find a more senior rigger to kind of take control, take him in, and help lead us back in the right direction. The animation itself gave us an equal amount of trouble. We had 1 animator in-house and the rest were sourced from overseas. But to capture the nuance of character acting required a significant amount of notes and revisions, and worse yet was when rigs wouldn't hold up. You couldn't tell if the animation was wrong or if the rig needed work, especially if the animator wouldn't tell you what do they need in order to progress, in order to address notes. Still though, as you can see, we managed to get there and the characters were coming to life, but big question was who would be voicing them? So this is the really exciting part, because when we started out, we were not confident with our chances of finding talent. I mean, after all, this is a new IP. We're a company with no track record making shows. We haven't even made a pilot yet. So we put up a casting call with descriptions for the characters, but none of the submissions could quite hit the level of acting that we required. Perhaps if it was for YouTube, if it was quickly produced, but for a streaming platform, not so much. We needed some professionals. Some of the descriptions for the roles included examples of actors or actresses that we were hoping to emulate, until someone on the team flat out said, why don't we just ask those actors? It hadn't even occurred to me, and the idea of it is it's just out of this world. Like these actors who you've known about for your whole life, what are the chances they'd actually say yes, right? But we decided to get the ball rolling when our artist Amphi linked us to Sarah Ann Williams, who is quite famous in the anime voice acting scene. And I myself had always imagined Kate Mulgrew, who was Captain Janeway in Star Trek, to voice Gekka. So we contacted her agent, we sent in material to whatever email we could find, in the vague hope that she might get back to us. And we found out through her agent that she only accepts roles through the Screen Actors Guild in America. And we had nothing to do with that. You know, we're Australian, we're a startup. How do you do that? So we ended up getting in contact with the Screen Actors Guild, and it was a very long process to enroll. It took about 8 months total. We were working during that whole time, but that was a long ongoing process. But eventually we got in, and after reviewing the scripts and the role itself, that's when Kate Mulgrew accepted the part, which was a pretty big deal. From there we sent out a message to David Hayter to voice Yon Zara, and he was more than happy to be involved, and that was just surreal. I've known about his voice acting since I was a little kid. And in fact, he is one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the industry. He is just a gentleman. He's been super supportive of Destruna since the beginning. He even helped me voice direct Kate Mulgrew one time, which is just wild. Christina V voice directed our group sessions, and she even voiced an episode 2 character for us. Another role that had appeared in the initial draft but got removed and hoping to introduce eventually was one for Charlie, who is also known as Critical on YouTube. Had a call with him about him voicing it. He seemed pretty interested, but it would have been later in the season. But the very last role, the most pivotal one, was the main character Don. So the dream casting would be someone like Tom Felton, but by this point, you know, we'd locked in the rest of the cast. So it actually made it quite simple to email his agent with this pretty legit listing of the people and the names that we have. You know, Kate Mulgrew, you know, fresh off Orange is the New Black, and David Hayter and Christina V. So, you know, amazingly, he reviewed the material, and after a time, he and his agent accepted, which was just out of this world. So Tom Felton even came in and voiced the pilot for us with the rest of the cast in a worldwide Zoom call. And contrary to the character that Tom plays, the man himself is incredibly polite, and he did an amazing job with the material we gave him, especially the scene with the argument between Don and Lona. That was a really pivotal moment, and he nailed it. If the acting in that scene was wrong, then it would have just blown the whole moment, but he did an excellent job. Yeah, Jake Kaufman and his team, you know, they composed the music for Shantae, OKKO, Mau Mau, you know, and he composed the action scene in the pilot. And at the same time, we recruited Frederick Weidman, who was the composer for Dragon Prince, to handle the rest of the episode. So dealing with Freddie was a joy, and he does amazing work. At the same time, our sound design team, Epic Mountain Music, they've been doing sound design for YouTube, for our YouTube channel for a long time now, and they've been our champions. So once the music was finished early, the sound design, that kept happening right down to the wire. There was so many notes I had to send, about little tiny moments that I imagined something would happen here or here. There was a lot of that, so they were very patient and they did an amazing job. So with all this, we had every element finished: the characters, the animation, the music, the voice acting, everything in between. So the way was clear for the pilot screening, but there were definitely some setbacks to overcome before then. So if you're wondering how many people worked on the pilot, it was about 50 names that appear in the credits, although at peak we had maybe 15 or so working at one time. Originally we were just going to screen the episode in-house on a Friday night, but when we started hearing more and more family and friends that were getting hyped and were keen to join, before you know it, there were just heaps of people that wanted to see the screening. So we relocated the screening plan to my house instead, gave ourselves a 2-week deadline for the end of April 2021, despite a fair chunk of the episode not being rendered yet. Worse yet, we'd been out of lockdown for months and there were daily rumors of another lockdown imminent every day. I knew that if people even caught a whiff of COVID danger, that the screening would just be cancelled. People are not going to show up. At the same time, there was a bit of bad news. I received word that my good friend Tolop had passed away. Many of you might recognize her character from Planet Dolan videos, or her appearance on my old Twitch live streams. You might not know that she was one of our best writers. She also wrote a fair few Super Planet Dolan episodes. This news messed me up. It still messes me up to this day, and I miss her a lot. So even with all this, I didn't have any choice but to adhere to the April deadline for the pilot. Some people worked overtime every day, more challenges, more shots to redo, more animation to refine. When I spoke to my technical director about the April deadline, it almost became a running joke, me saying, we need to wrap this up days before the deadline. And then at least the day before the deadline. And then maybe the morning of the deadline. And then hours before the screening, until finally, ultimately, we were rendering the episode minutes before the screening. And then the editing software would crash. So the best moment was showing off the full episode at the screening. Everything we've been working on for a solid year. It really felt like we pulled off the impossible, a small team putting out a show of this quality. Thankfully, there'd been no lockdown to delay the screening, but not even a month later, we were right back in lockdown anyway, so we definitely dodged a bullet. So it seemed like all the hard work was over, but that was actually just the easy part. Creating the pilot was the easy part compared to the real challenge that lay ahead. So the end of the pilot raised an important question. What next? So the original hope was that we would produce the whole season in-house on a 6-figure budget, and that quickly became a pipe dream. Not unless you're willing to compromise on the quality of the whole season to a pretty large extent. So the new plan became to pitch the show using the pilot and teaser as the selling tool. But in the meantime, what should we do? Because we can't just, sit around not doing anything at all while we wait to pitch this around. So we chose to use a smaller core team and chip away at episode 2 while we waited to hear from platforms like Netflix. I really wanted to keep our key members employed, as I think it's really unfair to shut down and ask them to just take off, given the expectation that it'll only be a few months to do our pitch and get greenlit, especially because our scripts are written, the pitch materials are ready, and hopefully receive funding for the whole season pretty soon. And boy, were we incredibly, laughably naive about that. In hindsight, had we already attached a known name producer and an agent, this might have been semi-realistic. But at that time, I was determined to seek contingency plans just in case, because I didn't know how things were going to go. So another opportunity actually presented itself. So Screen Australia, our government funding body for creative projects, met with our team and said they're unable to fund Destruna without a green light from a platform. So they suggested instead we develop a YouTube series while we wait for that green light using the same technology as Destruna. So this became the concept of LORGIES, which is set in a Destruna school with a floating race of orb creatures known as Lorgs. So we worked really hard to produce the pitch materials for this, while Screen Australia took their time to review for a funding greenlight, which could take 2-3 months. So this all seemed promising, and it allowed us to focus on the hardest, most important part of any show development. In the office, we'd spoken multiple times about how you're even supposed to pitch to platforms if they have a closed door policy. You can't just rock up at Netflix HQ and get a meeting. You can't do it. So I decided the best course of action was to message the people who had gotten shows made, the producers, the people who worked in the industry, and ask them about it. So, we'd built quite a few contacts over the course of production, including entertainment lawyers who let us speak with some of the team behind Bluey. Others we successfully cold contacted with emails, such as Fred Siebert, which was a pretty big thrill to speak to him, as I've known about him and his career since I was a little kid. We spoke to a number of Australian producers, some consultants, Bardell, the team behind Dragon Prince, and we started to build a really accurate picture of show pitching, what to expect, how to go about it, what their expectations are, the requirements, and what you'll be getting in return as well. Many of them were just flabbergasted about the quality and the ambition of the pilot, saying, wait, you made this on your own? So I'd been following cartoon and animation news articles, and that's how I found the former CAA agent, David Newman. He was interested in helping people sell their animated shows to platforms. Having David on really helped because we've been trying to contact Netflix unsuccessfully ourselves for about a year, but David already knew a lot of the people who worked at these companies and he could get us pitch meetings. So he proved very invaluable during this whole period. So he gave us some bad news though. Pitching is about mitigating a risk for the platform. So a pilot is great, but without a producer or studio attached, it doesn't matter how good your show idea is or what material you've produced. They won't trust you with millions of dollars. They won't trust you with a full season greenlight, and that's fair enough. So the first step was to attach a producer, a process that ultimately took 4 months. Now bear in mind, This is 4 months before you can even begin to pitch. It is largely due to this unexpected setback that our financial troubles began. So before now, the bank had always been happy to offer loans knowing that we planned to pitch to platforms. But now they pulled the rug out. Our last request for a loan top-up to take us the full 6 months was denied. The expense of running an office and keeping everyone employed is steep, even with a small team. And worse still, another lockdown had begun, and this one was the biggest one yet. 4 or 5 months, just endless. So the clock is ticking. Thankfully, we still had options, but things were getting dicey. We had to sell Destruna by the end of the year or we are done. So each month becomes more desperate than the last, starting in August 2021. So this is when our bank loan got rejected. So people in the office volunteered to defer payments. We scaled back to working 4 days a week. A lot of the overseas animators and contractors were asked to go on pause, which really sucked. It felt like, they'd been with us since so early on. They'd done all this amazing work, and yet. So our Screen Australia application would apparently take 6 weeks to review for LORGIES. We only had enough money to last until the end of September. So 2 months is not a lot of time. At the same time, we were going around talking to producers. We had some interest from Tangent, the studio responsible for the film Next Gen on Netflix, which was really promising. Christina V was hooking us up with a contact at Netflix, US. At the same time, we'd been reached out to by Netflix Australia, and they were really interested in seeing what we have to offer. So it was all kind of coming to a head. Year and a half of work holding the team together. At this point, it was pretty sink or swim. There was a lot of really promising leads here, and you just never know how things are going to go. But yeah, let's just say that things only got harder from here. So September 2021 is really the time where I guess things, you could tell that things were probably not going to work out. We didn't have any response from Netflix Australia. They didn't even give us the opportunity to pitch. We sent them the materials and they just never got back to us. We couldn't message Christina's contact at Netflix America because our agent said, you just don't go for it without a producer. It's basically a trap. Like you'll go there, you'll do your pitch, and they'll just never get back to you because they'll be like, who are these guys? At the same time, Tangent, who was still interested in Destruna, in just a seething case of irony, they just collapsed. Their whole company collapsed. I don't know if you guys saw the news, but in September, they basically fired everyone. And that was the exact same time we were talking to them. So that was really unexpected. Even though we still had, the potential of working with Screen Australia for this, that was just going to take too long. So we just made the hard decision. If none of these leads were panning out, so everyone received 2 weeks notice, unfortunately. All the team started applying for other work immediately, just to hedge their bets. Some of them took leave to see if the Screen Australia application with LORGIES was successful or if Destruna gets greenlit. So they stuck around. But, at this point, we'd lost half of our Destruna staff. We would have to rebuild. The optimal time had already passed for being able to get to work on episode 2 and onwards. So I decided to make a decision to just sell my house. I ordered boxes to pack up everything, just couldn't hold on anymore. I could have held on a little bit longer, but I was like, this isn't worth it. I'd already been umming and ahhing about this for ages now. And no words can really describe how disheartening it is to see just the morale flatline to this extent. The only light on the horizon is the potential for a Destruna deal with a platform, like Netflix. Otherwise, it feels like all of this was for nothing. So by this point, everyone stopped work or had moved on. So I'd packed up my house and I was gearing up to put my house up for an auction next month. I've been trying to refinance my mortgage or get a business loan in order to keep the business going in some capacity, but didn't have any luck. There was some hope though. We would hear from about a LORGIES application from Screen Australia really soon. We also had finally attached a producer, which was Jay Oliver, as our executive producer and showrunner. So we decided to just get pitching right from November. So in more bad news, the LORGIES application got rejected by Screen Australia. They said it was pretty borderline, almost got funded, but you know, ultimately they just couldn't take it on. And that was frustrating for a number of reasons. First off, it was their suggestion for us to go for this. And when we first talked to them, we mentioned, would 3 episodes be okay? And they said, yeah, it should be fine. And then, of course, that was one of their main concerns with the pitch, is that there's not enough episodes. So that was just bewildering. So by this point, I'm just bumming around at home, you know, just kind of bored out of my mind. I can't recommit to YouTube yet until we end up doing Destruna. Like, we end up finding out if we're getting Destruna made for a whole season. So at this point, we did a pitch to Crunchyroll, and we had 3 more scheduled for early December. So I moved out of my house officially and moved to an apartment, which was just very depressing. I mean, we were finally out of lockdown, yay, but our office was empty now because no one could keep working, so it was pretty meaningless. And yeah, things have been free since then, but we still just couldn't go back. So yeah, we worked the entirety of lockdown, and when it finally ended, we were done. So we found out that we got rejected from Crunchyroll. My house, it was just not a good idea to put it up for auction if people aren't interested, so we converted it to a private sale. It's just amazing that they've been selling like hotcakes all year, but now at the end of COVID, coincidentally when I want to sell, this happens. But did pitches for Netflix, Cartoon Network, HBO, Paramount, and they all went seemingly well. Just thankful that COVID meant that Zoom pitches were now possible, so it's much easier for me instead of traveling across half the world to go meet them. So at this point, just waiting to hear back from them. And to demonstrate how unknown this all is, I'm talking as if I was there at the time, because I was writing notes during this period, so I didn't know how things were going to turn out, if we're going to get a green light or not. I was actually writing my notes with 2 variants, one if we're greenlit and one if we're not. At this point, it's just hard for me to sleep, with the money issues bearing down. A lot of the team now finding other work, some of them holding on still. I wish I could say that this all sounds like a fun underdog story where you're sure to win and sure to succeed and everything through all this hardship, but life really isn't that way. And being stuck in debt and having the last 2 years wasted doesn't really sound great to me. But at this point, I'm obsessively checking my phone for emails every day, hopefully from Netflix. I can't sleep. I'm just keep rolling over and I'm looking at my phone, imagining to get an email that says congratulations, or it might be like, we like it, but we're gonna pass. If the pitch is unsuccessful, we don't really get a second shot. Platforms don't let you come back with the same idea. That would be it for Destruna. We all have to move on, and it really all comes down to this. It comes down to whether or not we're greenlit. So here it is, January 2022, and we did some follow-ups with Netflix and find out. Still haven't heard back from the other platforms, of course. Still waiting. But Netflix,
they said yes. Netflix said yes. Destruna's been greenlit for $50 million. It's happening, boys. We did it.
Nah, not really. We got a rejection. They really loved it, but they said the only reason they couldn't accept it is that it skews too young for their audience lanes. I just recently did pitches for Nickelodeon and Amazon, but at the same time, it feels like, what's the point? Because Netflix is the destination that I know it would suit the best, whereas all these other platforms we're applying to, if they want to take it, absolutely, but Netflix was the one to go for. So yeah, kind of sucks. So yeah, now I've lost my house. I've blown through every dollar I have, and without supporting YouTube during this time, I'm basically starting from scratch again. I don't really have anyone to blame but myself, but I knew what the risks were starting all this, and that's okay with me, especially if people can watch the pilot and they like it. What I feel at the moment? I just feel sad. I just feel sad that you could put all this effort in, you can achieve phenomenal results, and you just still lose. Like the Jean-Luc Picard quote. The only thing I want in this life is to, my singular goal is just to be able to make projects like this that people will enjoy. Just this. I've just never wanted to be YouTube famous or someone big or important. I want to believe in the dream that anyone can make a show like this or achieve their dream by being tenacious enough that it doesn't matter if you have the connections or the right circumstances. You can just be completely unknown, and as long as you put the hard work in, you can succeed. I want to prove it's possible so that others like me will attempt the same thing. You know, other YouTube creators who have the same ambitions, they might go for it too. So stories like how the Squid Game creator, you know, was trying for 10 years and he was losing all his teeth and he finally made it, is inspiring, and it's really relatable for me too. Because if I can literally build a team from scratch, invest every dollar, every second I have to spare, create an entire pilot with a dream cast, a pitch deck, a business plan, every script, outline, story bible, you know, get pitch meetings with all the big platforms, and manage it all during the worst lockdown in the world, then fuck man, that has to mean something. Now, I've been slowly writing a big guide based on everything that I've learned about developing and pitching you know, a show like this, and I learned a metric ton that I don't have enough time to cover in this video. I haven't even gone over any of that stuff. You know, that might help a lot of people who are trying to do the same thing as me. I would either turn it into a book, or I might turn it into a video, or both. I'm not sure. At this point though, I'm pretty cynical about the whole process. You know, waiting for approval and green lights and meetings from platforms and investors. It kind of feels terrible. Like, it's a long process with a tremendous amount of preparation work required, and yet it all comes down to waiting for weeks, months for this secret pitch discussion you're not involved in, only to be rejected with barely any reason given. It's even worse to be told, specifically by Netflix, that they love your project. They thought it was one of the best pitches ever, that it's a unicorn, they can't believe you created this by yourself. And yet, they reject it because it's not the demographic they're looking for. So the idea of pitching again is just laughable. It's laughable. Like, the work involved, the expense, the manpower, the stress, the time, the sacrifice, even without producing a full pilot like we did, you know, it's just a terrible business model. I wouldn't recommend this unless you are already rich with lots of free time. James from Odd Ones Out suggests I ask for fan funding, but I'm not going to do that. You know, because we need too much money to make a whole season like this, and you need a platform that's going to return the investment. YouTube is a terrible platform for this kind of content. Anything I make for YouTube would be on a much smaller scale, like LORGIES, but even then the business plan is kind of shaky. So now that I'm more free, I've got some VTubing content coming out immediately, using the same technology as Destruna. The plan was always to return to YouTube when Destruna became more self-sustaining, but if we're being told we can't work on that, then so be it. You know, I'll put all my work and attention into a platform that doesn't need permission to post content. There is lots of unused material for Destruna floating around, like concept art and storyboards, so I might consider turning the rest of the season into a webcomic if enough people jump on the Planet Dawn Patreon. But that's pretty much it. I'm also thinking about turning Studio Destruna into a private creatives community where I can, you know, help mentor artists and writers and would-be showrunners one-on-one. So if you're someone creative looking for some advice, feel free to apply via email with what's on screen or in the description box below. So all I ask of you guys is that you will watch the pilot, and when you do so, recognize all the amazing people who worked on it and sacrificed so much. So even though it cost me everything, I don't regret making it, not even for a second, because this was a once-in-a-lifetime, like a privileged opportunity to be able to even try this. So regardless of all the struggle, at the end of the day, I'm happy to save up and do all this again, even if it takes a decade. But it was an interesting journey. Just a shame it didn't turn out differently.